restart the recording, and I'll give you the permission to share.
Awesome.
Hello, Hime, how are you?
Fine. How are you? Welcome,
Very
everybody.
good. Yes,
How are you feeling today?
very good. Very good.
Awesome. Did you wake up wanting to know more about BIM strategy?
I do for sure.
Awesome. Okay. If you want, we can start with the session.
Yeah,
Let me,
let's go. Can you try sharing your screen?
yes. There you go. You should be seeing my screen. Are we okay?
Yep.
Awesome. So today's session will be about BIM strategy for project startup. But before we start, I have a general question. I promise that it has to do with the session. What would happen if you start a road trip without a map or GPS? What do you think? Please answer in the chat. You get lost very quickly. Yes, totally agree. Um, Definitely, you will get lost. Probably you will waste gasoline, and it will take you a lot of time to get where you want to go. Uh, yeah, maybe have fun anyway. Sure. Um, you may find that you're moving in the wrong direction, have a crazy unexpected adventure. That sounds good. um, Follow the sun like that, Martha. Exactly. So without a clear direction, even with the best tools, or maybe you have the best car ever and good intentions, but you may risk wasting time and never reaching your destination. Even you may still enjoy the ride. Um, you will spend more time figuring out things or where to go than actually moving forward. So this is why a strategy, why we need a BIM strategy for our BIM projects. It will give us direction, alignment, and checkpoints. So we drive with purpose. Basically, it will give us a general direction, but we may have some good adventures too. Um, so what we'll be talking about today, first we'll go over some general definitions about tailor-made BIM strategy. Then we'll be talking about asking the right questions, the plan of action of our strategy, the implementation of the strategy, and finally to wrap up some keys for success, and we'll have some room for questions and answers. So first, I would like to agree with you on some statements that I know that you already talked with other speakers in previous sessions. First of all, your participation is key in the questions and trivia. The idea here is to share my experience and Sandy's experience, but also that we as a community could share our thoughts and our experiences too. Um, if you want to share your thoughts, raise your hand or use the chat. Please not the mic directly. I think that you can do it anyway, but fortunately we have Nico that will be moderating the session, so he will be paying attention to the chat. Well, you already talked with Pia about the BIM manager journey in general, with Nico about building a second brain with Notion, and today you will be sharing some thoughts with me. My name is Jimena Dinota. I'm an architect and a BIM specialist. I'm based in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Um, I'm also studying to become an educational technology specialist. I'm really into education. And I teach at university, both history of architecture for architects to be, and also BIM for construction administration in the postgraduate course to become a BIM specialist. Here at Slantis, I'm a project architect, and I've participated in some complex projects like BIM-wise, where I developed the BIM strategy, and that's why I'm here today talking about this. So some takeaways that you will get from this session, we will talk about strategy for you to understand what it means in BIM projects. We'll talk about the assessment part for you to understand what to assess for what we need to assess for a smooth project kickoff. And finally, we'll talk about planning and implementation for you to be able to design a BIM strategy that aligns with project goals and team expertise. And you might be wondering, what's the difference between a BIM strategy and a BIM execution plan? Well, this is kind of a personal opinion on this, but I've always felt like the BIM execution plan or those structured documents are kind of feel like a need to bureaucratically fill in some kind of template document to comply with a standard. And I think that that shouldn't be the spirit of the strategy. So this whole session is an invitation to you all to deconstruct the idea of a BIM execution plan, so that we get like the real understanding of what elements do we need to develop a smooth project and why we need them. Then we may, in the implementation part, we definitely will talk about how to share this with the team and how to keep it like in the everyday tasks, but that is kind of the end of this journey. So let's talk about a bit in general about BIM strategy. I would like to know, what do you understand by BIM strategy? How would you define it, or what do you relate with BIM strategies? You can share in the chat. Any thoughts? Okay, this is something new. This is very good. All new things. Okay, some people here that say that they don't really understand what it actually means. It sounds kind of general, maybe. The good way to do things at our business, like that. A plan or a north on how to implement BIM into projects. Yes, the rules to follow. Thinking of problems before they happen. Love that. Starting template and guidebook on it or on intranet. Maybe yes. BIM strategy is what you do first before the BIM execution plan. Yes. Like it's like the thinking before, right? BIM implementation, how we deliver projects from a BIM perspective. Love all your answers. So we will kind of structure all this in kind of in a just one narrative, but all your thoughts are great. Thank you for sharing. So in general, a strategy is a plan of action designed to achieve a long-term goal. So we will first need to define our goals, and then we will work with our plan of action. Especially in BIM projects, it will be the plan of action designed to achieve our BIM goals. We will go on a bit later on this one. So what's BIM strategy? We define it as a plan of action, but this action should happen, or this thinking should happen at multiple levels. As a BIM manager, you will be in charge of developing the company-wide BIM strategy that will have to do with the quality assurance processes, the content management, the general workflows of the studio, maybe licenses and stuff. Some of these topics you will be going over in the next sessions with Pauli and with Lea. And then there will be a strategy thinking process for each project in an overall scope, and then the specific project information and modeling strategy. Today we'll be going to talk about the project scope, so we'll cover this part. But as I said, in the next sessions, you will be able to talk about some of the company-wide strategies with other speakers. So why develop a tailor-made BIM strategy? So we will think this is strategy for each project in a different way. And why do we need to do it that way? Because this will help us enhance efficiency, thus reducing costs and times, ensure quality, thus reducing errors, because we will somehow develop some workflows that will allow us to be as precise as possible, so we don't have to rework or redo any tasks. And finally, since we will trust our models because they will be very efficient and they will have high quality, we will be able to make data-driven decisions that will lead to better project outcomes. This sounds very nice, but we will see how this actually then affects the project outcomes. I present you here with mini me, and that will be helping me not to forget things. So the idea of a tailor-made BIM strategy is to work smarter and not harder. Okay, you may have heard this quote several times, but this is actually where we're going. So I wanted to share with you, and I see here Nicholas asking if the mini-me part is part of the BIM strategy. Maybe yes, you can use that resource. So I will share with you a project that I've been working on for some time, not literally, but just the context. It's a prefab construction project that it has some customizable elements like doors or windows. And we have 16 different layouts that are almost the same, but they're slightly different. So when we first started working with this project, we inherited a BIM strategy from another consultant. And as like times are always very tight, we continued with our strategy at first. And we developed like our first sets with this strategy. And then we noticed while we were executing the strategy that it was not the most efficient. So we developed our tailor-made BIM strategy. So I would like you to, like by intuition, let me know and react with the sparkles if you think that project 1 was more efficient, or with a rocket if you think that project 2 was more efficient. You can add your reactions in the chat, because if you add it in your camera, I won't see that. I hope to see many rockets here. Awesome. Yes, love this. Exactly. With the first strategy, it took us about 2 months to develop as a full set. With the strategy number 2, it took us only 3 weeks. So we saved 60% of the time and resources by just thinking how we could avoid like making these repetitive tasks of modeling and also documenting. So what do we need to pack for this BIM strategy? First, we will need standards that will give us clarity, or the project, some clarity on how to do things, and definitely consistency. Remember that BIM is a collaborative process, so there will be many people working in the same models, but we will want like the set to look as if it was done by one person. Setting standards will give us this clarity and this consistency. Then we will need project workflows that will help us with communication within the team and with coordination. It will allow us to, it will allow everyone to know where to share, how to track their tasks, where to find information. So we are all kind of in the same page. And finally, we'll have our model and information strategy that will help us achieve our BIM goals. And all the efforts that we make will be targeted to that goals. So we don't, for example, over model or under model what we need to do. And it will enhance efficiency, as we mentioned, and all this will bring client satisfaction, that at the end is what we all need and we seek for. So what happens if we only have standards and model and information strategy? This will result probably in information silos, because every team will be working on their part and they will be sharing just some part of the information that we need to continue with the project. It will lead to miscommunication between teams, maybe missed deadlines if the schedule is not clear. And this will, at the end, result in some kind of culture problems, like people blame each other for things, that we hate that. So very important to set up workflows. So we will have a clear understanding of what to produce and how, but no coordination between teams. If we have standards and project workflows, but we don't define a model and information strategy, we will be probably over modeling or add more modeling, and we will not be compliant with our BIM goals and the BIM uses that we set. So we will have consistent models and communication, but the effort wasted because of unclear priorities. And finally, if we have model information and information strategy and workflows, we will be very well communicated. Teams will work happily, but we will have chaotic and unreliable models. So this will lead probably to kind of a chaotic work, everyday work, and probably problems with like documentation and model handovers. So that's why we need the three of them. We will get smooth collaboration, predictable outcomes, and satisfied clients. So here we have kind of the recipe of a good BIM strategy. How do we get there? Well, there are three main steps towards this BIM strategy. First, we will have the assessment, then the planning, and finally the communication and implementation with the team. Most people tend to like focus in the planning, but my take on this is that we should focus in the assessment, because we first need to really understand what we need to do before we actually think how to do it. And how this is kind of, how this BIM strategy is part of a project timeline. First, I have like a strong feelings about when the BIM manager should jump into the project timeline. I think that we should start our collaboration within the negotiation. Like we need to ask the client what they actually need, or try to help them understand what they need, so we can get like precise contracts that cover all the things that we actually need to do, and to get proposals that are accurate with what the client actually needs and with the time that this will take us. So we'll start working in the assessment part. Then after the contract or the sign up of the contract, we'll start with our project and BIM planning. I strongly recommend you to pilot test some part of your strategy, probably maybe some workflows or the model and information strategy. In case you haven't done this before, it's good for you to take at least, I don't know, half a day or a day to test that the workflows that you're thinking about actually work. And then we will have the project and BIM kickoff that could be together or separated, depending on the complexity of the project, probably. And then we will have the project execution. And I think that is very important to evaluate the strategy as we go. It depends obviously on the complexity and the length of the project. And then we will have the project handover. And after the handover, the archive of the models and of all the information that we delivered. And very important to gather lessons learned. And you might be wondering, how does this general timeline how do we work with the rest of the team? Well, I really recommend you to team up with the PM. The PM is probably the person that already knows the client, if they have worked with them before. Actually knows the team, like the people that you're working with, their expertise, their strengths and weaknesses. And most of the workflows that we'll be talking about are kind of in a mixed scope with the project manager. So this part, I think it's key. While the project manager will be in charge of the general project and to meet client expectations, deadlines, and budget, you as a BIM manager will need to ensure that BIM processes enable accurate, coordinated, and efficient designs and documentation that aligns with BIM goals and project goals, obviously. So we will start with the assessment. And I put this general title, Asking the Right Questions. So we will be talking a bit about questions. So the strategy for us is what converts kind of the actual information, the available information, that's the input, into the output. So we will be developing this plan of action to get our deliverables and our goals delivered. But first, we will need to understand what's the available information and which are our project goals or BIM goals. I would like to know, what question would you ask before starting a new project? You don't need to know anything about BIM strategy for this. What would you ask about? Scope and team. Yes, definitely. Timeline. Or very preoccupied about timeline. Yes. Deliverables, what the client expects in terms of BIM deliverables, love that. Milestones, final deliveries. Do we have the exchange information requirements? This is kind of part of building the exchange information requirements. If you champion the project in the negotiation part, this will be, this assessment will be a part of that. Kobe, if we need Kobe, yes. Yes, I know that most BIM managers are included in that phase. That's what I'm recommending you to like try to. Scope, the client, maturity level of the stakeholders, definitely. What are the milestones? And final delivery. LOD, yes. Level of development, format of submission, expectations, love that. The organization requirements. Yes, you're very into this, love this. So we will try kind of to talk about some points that you shouldn't miss when you make this assessment. First, about the input, so the information about the project and the team. I would recommend you first to talk about the team, the strengths, their strengths and weaknesses, the size of the team, their expertise. If you will be working with consultants, what's their expertise too? Because this will be actually a key in all the workflows that you develop. They should be able to just work with them. Then about the project, I would ask, as you mentioned, about scope, about the project phases, the timeline, code requirements, if there will probably be some, but if they have some specific regulations. Then you also mentioned about client, like we should know about the client workflows, their standards, if they have any, or if they want us to comply with any standard, like national standards or international standards. We should ask for some sample sets so we can see how they usually work. But most important, we should know about their pain points and their special concerns when it comes to project execution in general and with BIM projects in particular. This way we'll be able to actually gain their trust and to actually understand what our BIM goals are. Then we will ask about the building, its location, the market, obviously the dimensions of the building, the construction system. This will give us some clues on which maybe on the model information strategy. And finally, our resources. What do we have available to develop this project? The hardware, the software, maybe even, I don't know, meetings or all the elements that we need to develop the project. And then we should start. Oh, before that, thank you, Minimi. I was about to forget about this. Please involve the whole team. Like, you will need this information, but maybe you are not the one that is going to get this information. You can as I mentioned, the project manager and all the team, maybe they already know the client and they have already worked with them. So it's important for you to like ask for this information, and maybe you're not the one that's literally asking the questions, but you just gather all this information to take into account in your strategy. Then we will talk about the output. You will probably have this client that says, I need BIM. They don't know why. but they just need it and they want it. So since you're the expert here, you will be the one in charge of asking the right questions to really understand what the client needs and which are their pain points and how could we help them with those. So about the output, we will need to know, as you already mentioned, the deliverables, if we need to deliver the models or not. Maybe it's just the set, a sheet list if they have, if we need to deliver a bidding material schedule or any information that should be extracted from the models. Then with once we understand the project scope and the building characteristics and the deliverables, we'll be able of defining like the BIM goals. We will try to understand the why. Why do we need BIM for? So it may be to reduce clashes because they had some bad experience before. It could be to have reliable cost estimates, to shorten construction schedules. So you will develop a 4D simulation. So we first need to understand why we need BIM. And with that information, then we will ask what we need to do. So we will define the BIM uses. If we need to run clash detection, quantity takeoffs, 4D sequencing or simulations, etc. And once we have all this information, we will be able to define the how. So the level of development, how deep we need to go with the model detailing, and how or which information do we need to add to those models. So that's how I would think about this output. Some of this information will be you asking kind of questions to the client, and some of these will be you just trying to understand the needs of the project. And you will be the one that defines some of these, probably BIM uses and stuff. So the goal here is to truly understand the client needs. Like maybe they don't have the experience with BIM projects, or they just come and say, I want BIM. So your task here is to really understand how to get there, even if they don't. But how do we make good questions? I will give you some tips in general that worked for me before. First, to give context, but not too much. It's not the same like asking, what do you want from BIM? Or what do you want from the BIM model? That's very general. And maybe the person that's receiving that question doesn't understand where you're going with that and what should they answer. So maybe it's better to ask the question and then give some the context. For example, which are your specific pain points when it comes to project development? Because we would like to understand how can BIM help you achieve your goals. But don't give too much context, because sometimes people get lost in your context and don't really understand the question. So it's a balance, as usual. Then aim the question. There will be like different stages in the conversation. If you want people to open up, like to start telling you about their pain points and what they actually need, use open-ended questions. For example, what concerns do you have about using BIM on this project? And then at some points you will actually need to define some specific concepts. So you will want precise answers, then use closed questions. For example, do you require an LOD 350 or an LOD 400 for construction documentation? And here I also recommend you to give some context for them to understand what this means. It's like you need a fabrication documentation, or it's just the construction documents. And this will help you, like, in a way, try to start defining some of the output that we mentioned before. Obviously, you will need to also add a layer of complexity here, where you should try to understand how much that person knows about BIM. To understand if you ask a closed question, you may get like an answer that you don't want. So you may ask like once and again, like the same question or why. And that's what brings us to the next tip, that would be to ask questions like a kid. Don't stop in the first why. You will need to somehow unreveal the true needs or the root needs of your client. So, for example, if the client says we need an LOD 400 for all disciplines, that sounds like a lot. This might be real, but it is probably not. You should ask why. What do you need it for? Like all the disciplines, because they just want highly detailed models. But what for? You know that there will be a lot more information that they need. So then you ask why again, and it's just because the contractor asked for it. And why did they ask for that? Maybe it's because it helps them during construction. That sounds still a bit like ambiguous. And if you still keep asking why, you may get to the root cause of this. That is because they have problems with clashes before. But you know that for clash detection, they don't need an LOD 400. So this is what I recommend you, like to keep asking why, and don't just stop in the first why. This is called, if you want to read more about it, is the 5 whys strategy. And it's used to get to the root cause of the problems. So to sum up, a good question arises from curiosity, from observation. So if you have some sample projects or previous projects from the client, you might want to clearly observe and pay some attention on those sample sets to understand how they work. And definitely about experience. So bring all your past experience to these questions, and they will help you really understand what the client wants and how like what what success looks like. Sorry. So
Hey,
yeah,
Hime, what do you think if you take a couple of questions? It's a couple of
sure.
good ones. Yeah, okay. So the first from Tyler, how much does project and BIM planning usually vary per project? What are the outcomes of this planning phase?
Okay, how much time do we take for planning?
Yeah, I
It
guess
really
how
depends.
how different is it from one project to another? So it's clear that each project has its own strategy. I guess you still restart from some base information and then you do it. Do you know how long this could take and how much
It's
does it vary?
it's very difficult. I guess most of the times it depends on how much time you have available. It's kind of sad, but it's true. But it depends actually not even in the complexity of the project itself, but in this like maybe the example that I gave about like repetition patterns. Because for example, now we're working with a house that's very small, but it's really complex because of these kind of small variations between models. So it actually depends on the complexity of or how efficient you want to make it. You
Mhm.
can always go with a template and it would just work for some things and don't work for others. But I think that at least you should take, I don't know, a week to think about it, because there are some straightforward projects that you may take just one day to set up everything, or 2 days or 3 days, and it would just work. But in others, it's good to like develop the plan, or maybe develop um, different strategies and try to somehow measure which one will be more efficient or better for a team sometimes.
I have my own question. So I really like the question with specifically about LOD because that's often one of the biggest question with clients. They ask, "We want this level of LODs, but why do you need it?" Because, someone at some point asked us for it. So I'm wondering, do you have other lists of good questions? And how do you figure out where the first question? So you said that often one question leads to another, multiple levels. So
We
beyond LOD, what are a few examples of awesome questions you could ask your clients?
Well, I didn't prepare that, but I think that the best way of defining the LOD, as I mentioned, is like first defining the BIM uses, because once you know what you need the model for, then you will understand how detailed it should be and which information it should have. So what I would recommend is first to analyze like the project phase with the deliverables and the BIM goals that we get from the clients, from the understanding that we have of the client goals. And with that, define the BIM uses. And with the BIM uses, I think it's quite clear, like the understanding of the level of development. And then you can start kind of asking like for each category which level of development, but that would take like a lot of time, and sometimes
Mhm.
this is not that required.
Yeah, BIM user is the biggest one. But probably another one for me would be asking how much involvement the client wants in the course of the project, if they need access to a platform like ACC, and or it's really they get delivered the project at the end and they don't get involved that much. All right, let's take another one, then we'll keep on moving. From Mauricio, I'm wondering ideally how long this assessment part should be. Clearly, it depends on the project size, but I'm guessing no more than a couple of client team meetings plus available info analysis. So, do you know how long this phase would typically take? I guess it depends on the scope of the project.
Yes, and it depends also like in your knowledge about the client. If you work with them before, it's easier because you know how they think. But I agree that it's kind of maybe a first meeting with them to like get some answers, and then for you could prepare like a first draft of the strategy and then meet with them to see if that really works for them, and try to like then make the final adjustments.
Okay, so after the first meeting, prepare kind of a document with the key information to provide it and ask them to confirm it's right.
Yeah.
Okay, there are a couple more questions, but I think we'll keep them for later in the session. So I'll let you keep
Okay.
going.
Awesome. I'll share again the screen. Okay, so now we get to the plan of action. If we already have our input and our output, now we're working with the plan of action. Um, we're going to go in deep with these three elements that we mentioned before. First, as I mentioned, like we need the standards, but this is not something that you're going to develop in this stage. What you will do with the standards is to define which ones will be using, the team will be using to develop the models. So you should set modeling standards, documentation standards, and information standards. This may come from like your company-wide strategy, so you already have your set of standards, or maybe you just take an I would say a standard, but I don't know if that makes sense. Maybe the for example the AIA BIM forums LOD definitions, or you don't need to develop everything. You can take like some standards from somewhere else. But it's important for your team to have these standards like every day in handy. So if they start modeling walls, they will first look at how should they do it, or that's the ideal scenario. And then it is important also if the client asks, or if you define that you will follow some international standards like the ISO 19650 or national standards for your project, they should be visible too for the whole team. So the only thing you need to do about standards is to define them and make them visible. Then about the project workflows, this is something that, as I mentioned, you will probably define with the project manager also, or the job captain in case there's not a project manager. But the first three that I'm going to mention, maybe you have more like of a take on this because they are more related with BIM. First, the common data environment setup. You could choose between different platforms, but you will probably go with the one that the studio usually uses. So it will be maybe part of your company-wide strategy. I have used, I don't know, Google Drive, ACC, but this will probably come from like another level of strategy. But you should definitely take into account like the file extensions if you're depending on which softwares are you working with, the team workflows that they actually know how to use the platform, define where to consume information from and where to upload information to, like to actually have a structure of this common data environment that everybody understands, and to set permissions in case you have different teams working with it. Then about the BIM accountabilities, remember that it depends. It always depends on the size of the project and the team. But even if you don't have, I don't know, a BIM coordinator, you will need someone in charge of keeping the standards in your project. So maybe I always like to see this as BIM accountabilities, that it's not necessarily a role like with a name, but you will need to choose from your team someone to maybe run the QA/QC processes, the quality control processes, to keep the standards running and to remind the team that they need to see the standards before doing anything. And this all obviously will have to do with team expertise in BIM projects. Then you will need to set the quality assurance and quality control processes. You will talk about this with Leah in future sessions, so I won't go into this. And the last three items will be the ones that will be more kind of a teamwork with the project manager, team communication, schedule and task tracking. Obviously, you will need to kind of make sure that all BIM processes are taken into account. For example, for the schedule, the coordination meetings, the trainings if the team needs any training, like modeling milestones, documentation milestone, etc. But this may be kind of a shared scope with the project manager. And finally, I would like to talk about model and information strategy. This is kind of how the questions that we all make ourselves when we start a project. It's like how many models, how I'm going to link them, etc. So we will talk about model structure and files, linking strategies, information structure and information takeoffs, which software are we going to use, and maybe a modeling log in a fantasy world that everybody uses. So as I mentioned, maybe the project workflows will be kind of a shared scope with the project manager. So we are going to go in deep with the model and information strategy. But before we get there, I will really recommend you to set some metrics to know you're on the right path. So you will you will try to measure if the strategy is working or not. And how do we do this? Maybe with time, like if the schedule is actually being followed and we're complying with the milestones that we set. They may have to do with quality, like how many quality control checklists the models have passed, and how good they look in general. We could work with quantities, like the amount of views that we developed in the certain amount of time, or maybe with client requests or client questions about the project, like are we being clear with the client or not? But I really invite you to set these metrics so you know if you're on the right path or not. So about the model and information strategy, this is the way I do it, at least. This is kind of my chain of thought when I start a new project. Then you can share yours in the chat if you want. But the first question will be how many models? This will certainly have to do with the size of the project. If we have different buildings, like the size of the models also, maybe it's a small project, but it's really complex and we don't have hardware enough to handle those models. So maybe we will divide it into parts. What else? Maybe on the construction system, if that works, maybe we have a podium and then the rest of the building. But this is kind of the first question. If we have different disciplines, if we have consultants or different teams working in the same project, this could be all things to consider when answering this question. Then where to model or where to put information to, like in which model will we upload that information or model stuff, and which stuff are we going to model in each model. Then where do we want to extract information from? If we want to make quantity takeoffs or even documentation, like where are we going to document the project? And finally, this has to do with the previous question, but it's quite important to understand where are we going to print from or export the files. And once we have like our first answer, this is what I mentioned, like the first draft of the strategy, I would have started asking the strategy new questions, like for example, about the printing, like how many models do I have to need open to print all the sets? And maybe rethink if this is what I want or not. About the documentation, how many times do I want to document every part of the project in case you have maybe repetition? You will want to do it just once or as few times as you can. So how many times do I want to document, and how many times do I want to model every part of the building? So this is kind of like the first line will be the first draft, and then we will try to make our strategy even more efficient. But let's take this to a case study. This is obviously inventive, but because I can share the projects that we're working with, but I think that will help us kind of understand this efficiency chain of thought. So imagine that you receive a message here from Pao that I think is there in the chat that says, "Hi, Hime, our client has decided to get this project approved, so they want to move fast to develop the DD set. So we already know that we will need to develop fast a design development set for approval. Then here it says that we also like accurate quantity takeoffs because the client had some problems in the past with budgeting. And finally, that we will be working with our consultants and that we agree that they will model their disciplines, but we will need to run clash detection to get a clash-free model." So what would you do first? You received this message. What do we do first? Let's see if you have heard anything that I've said before. What would you do first? Read the contract. Yes. Fill out the BIM project setup form, and then we can meet afterwards like that. Ask Pao things. Yes, definitely. Thanks, Pao, for that. We will ask you lots of things. Set the standards. Yes. But basically, ask questions, okay? Maybe to Pao. Maybe we'll ask Pao to meet with the client too. But basically, ask many questions, as many as you can, for you to understand like the input and the output, as was mentioned before. Sometimes maybe at first you have a long list of questions that you should answer for every project, and then with experience you will get like to as you talk with people, you will understand what you need to know. But yes, what kind here Nico says, what kind of quantity takeoffs? Why do they need it? Yes. What levels of accuracy? Exactly. Yes. We want to know more about this. This is too general. Yes, totally agree, Jose, with that. He's saying that ask again until you feel comfortable with the answers. Totally. So imagine that we ask Paul many questions and we get some answers. So we will have our input that will be, this is And be critical with Pao's answers. Yes, too. For the input, we will know that we have a 12-story multifamily building with repeated units. Pay attention to that. The construction system is a concrete podium plus a wood frame system. The team will be the PM plus a job captain and 2 modelers. That we may see that maybe this is too much with our good strategy. And then finally consultants, 1 for structural and another 1 for MEPF. And from Pao's message, we understand that we need precise quantity takeoffs for budgeting. With Nico's question, we will understand also how precise they need to be. Maybe we could ask for a kind of a bidding material schedule, so we know which materials do we need to consider, and with which units. Then we know we need to develop a design development set for quick permitting, so we need to do it fast. And finally, create a coordinated clash-free design. So now we're going to talk about kind of abstractly about this. But imagine that you have, for example, your input will be the schematic design model in Rhino, maybe, that the design team has been working with. And we will have our company's detail library, our company's content library, families, etc. So this will be our input files. And then we also already know, since we asked lots of questions, that we have that our output will be quantity takeoffs, design development. For us, is the architectural model that the client asked for, the design development set, and finally coordination reports that will lead us to a clash-free model. So as you may have seen, I've added also the extension of each file, like for everybody to understand in which software they should be working with, or how, or like which extensions should we export. And now I start with the questions. So first, how many models? This is kind of a first pass of the strategy, like our draft. So as a first idea, I could say, like, I want 1 model for each discipline. We will be working as a studio in the architectural model. Then we have our consultants working in their own models. This will help definitely with teams not messing up with others' models. And obviously, we will need to understand then where to model or input information to. First, we will try to understand where do we want to input information, like the available information. So in this case, we've decided to export the Rhino model as a DWG, just to have as a reference in our Revit model. And then also these questions is related with linking, like if we link, for example, architecture as a background for MEP, then this will be information that we are inputting into other models. So the linking strategy is key in this case. For this, we'll be linking every model with each other, so we have all the information available, even if we can't touch other teams' models. And this is an invitation for you to not only think like what we'll be linking, which model will be linked with others, but also how are we going to consume that information. Sorry if I make this like very Revit based, but that's where we work with. But for example, you could link this information like live linking, or like from the shared folder or from the consume folder. So you should understand in which stage of the project you want to consume that information. And if you, in case you need it, I don't recommend that for all times, but live linking the models, like, so when anyone sync one model, you will get all the information instantly. Maybe that's not what we want. So try to think about that to develop a more efficient strategy. And then we have our other our other questions that would be where to document or extract information from and where to print or export from. So in this case, in this first draft, we have decided to, for example, make the quantity takeoffs from the architectural model. So we will link with the links of MEP and structural. We will get with our schedules all the information. So if you want to know more about that, Nico will be giving a session in some weeks about schedules. So they could be really useful. And then we will have like our outputs. The architectural model obviously comes from the architectural model. The design development set will be printed from the 3 models, discipline models. And finally, we will need to develop a coordination model, in this case with Navisworks. So we will export all the disciplines models in NWC. So we can run coordination in this federated model to get our coordination reports. So with first kind of draft of this strategy, that I really recommend you to do it maybe with a board, kind of with a Miro board or a Figma board, so you can move things around and test different things. We can get like the client and your team to understand rapidly what you're thinking about. This could get as complex as you want, but I think that people need to understand what you're trying to say. And some information that I would add to this would be the accountables of each model, like who is in charge of keeping it like clear, consistent, etc. And some references or legends to understand what these arrows and boxes mean, like so that we all speak the same language when reading this. And then once we have asked the questions about how many models, where to model, and where to document and print from, we will get like the kind of the what if questions, or how many times do I want to do this? So for example, for our multifamily building, we could model every unit, every repeated unit in a separate model. Many people do this with groups too, inside the same model. That may work. I don't like groups, but that's my take on this, so you can do whatever you want. But the idea is for you to develop a strategy that will lead you to gain efficiency and not to do things the same thing once and once again. Maybe you discover this while you're executing the project, and you can always like kind of pivot and change your strategy to make it more efficient. In this case, for example, if we model the 3 units and we link it, and then we have many instances of the same, you will link the unit just once, and you can even document it just once. Like you can develop a floor plan and then link it by view in the architectural model, so you will be just documenting the same unit once. So with this first strategy that we drafted, we had to model 100% of the building. I know this is kind of simplified. You would never do this. You will probably copy and stuff. But if you need to make a change, you will need to make it like in every unit separately. So this will mean modeling 100% of the building. And with strategy 2, we are only modeling at the 20% of it. So this will mean saving time and resources, a lot of time and resources, and we will gain efficiency. We will gain consistency, because if we do this just once, it will look the same in all the instances of the project. So it will look like people will clearly understand what we want to show, but we will also gain complexity. So here's where we need to consider the whole team in the strategy, and understand if they actually have like the tools and the expertise to use this strategy. If not, maybe we should kind of deprecate efficiency a bit in order for the whole team to work comfortably. And my last recommendation about planning will be to plan for the unknown. It's like many strategies fail because you try to think about the future and how things are going to happen, and we clearly can't do that. So what we need to do is kind of strategize in a way that is flexible enough. We need to set directions. We need to understand where we're going and different milestones, but the strategy should be flexible enough for you to make turns and changes on the go. So the recommendation would be that you don't need a perfect plan because it will probably fail at some point, and that's okay. So you need to set a clear direction, but have some room for evolution. And try to think your strategy as a system, like a way of doing things, and not necessarily how specifically you will do everything, because it will give you some flexibility to pivot if necessary. And finally, like, think strategy for change and not for certainty. Like, imagine that there will be some situations where you won't have control. So if the team knows how to do things in general, they will be able to adjust to whatever happens during the project. So all this will lead us to the implementation of our planning. We already set up the standards, we set up all the workflows that we need, and the model and information strategy, and now we need to communicate this with the team. So this is a very important part. Many projects lack of a BIM kickoff. I think it's very important because here we're going to align the whole team. It's important for all the stakeholders to participate in this one, or at least all the ones that will be needing to work with the models, but also like access the models somehow, as Nico mentioned, maybe through the ACC or through another platform, but they will need to understand how everything's working so they can use that information to make decisions and to work with the information also. So I really like this quote from Noah Gannett that says that make sure that before everyone builds or sells or launches anything, I would say model anything, there is a clear understanding of what success looks like. So which are our BIM goals and where are we going, like the clear direction. How to get there, you tell them about your planning and all your strategy, and why it's the best route forward. People need to be committed with your strategy. They need to really understand why we're doing things this way and why it's the best way of doing this. For example, if you think of this second version of your strategy and it enhance efficiency, but it will get a bit complex in another way, you should explain them why. Like, okay, you will need to have at least 4 modules open. Make them believe that that's the right way of doing things. And then this is where the BIM execution plan appears. So here in the left, you will see like a never-ending Word document with all the BIM execution plan. So all the information that you develop during the planning. But something that often happens is that the strategy kind of dies in a document that nobody sees. But we need the BIM execution plan or your strategy to be visible for the whole team all the time. For example, at Slantis, we have like a project page where we see the schedules, the tasks, the BIM strategy, everything is shown. Like every time we get to the office, we open that page because that's what we are going to work with. And everything's visible for the whole team. So you need to understand that like strategy is more than a document. It needs to be transformed into something that moves teams and that drives motivation. And very important to give people like autonomy. If you develop your workflows and you show them, they will be able to make decisions as they go. So that's why I invite you to, instead of having a BIM execution plan the standard way, that if maybe it is required by, I don't know, the ISO 19650, then you need to develop it. But you could do it in a way that people actually use it, because you may have heard that the BIM execution plan is kind of a live document. To make it actually alive, you need to show it in a way that the people will use it every day. So this is what I wanted to share with you. This is a very simple Notion page. I will now show it like actually Notion. But it is a way in which we could have, for example, embedded our BIM strategy from a Figma jam. And people can access that and make changes if they want. And also like kind of divide the information in bytes. So people get fast to where they want to get. If they want standards, they just go to the standards button and they get what they want. So they will probably use it. And here are some apps or platforms that I recommend you for this. Figma and Miro for the model information strategy, maybe, or for thinking, for like brainstorms and thinking with your team. Then Notion or Loop or Obsidian or wherever you want to put this information, to kind of make this structure of information. And I know you've been talking about Plannerly before. I just tested it. I think it's very good that it's structured like the ISO 19650. So if you need to comply with that standard, it's great because you won't miss anything because everything's there. But for small projects or for like if you want teams to actually be involved in the strategy, it may be a bit overwhelming. There's too much information. But it's very good to structure the information. So maybe you should consider it as one of the possibilities to show your strategy. I would recommend something more interactive. And apart, like if you already use, for example, Notion or Loop within your company, it will be easier for everybody to use it because they already know it. Plannerly, you will need to make them maybe see tutorials or somehow explain them how to use it. I want to share with you this page very quick. So for example, we have like BIM strategy. We can define the BIM goals. So everybody knows where we're going and where do we need to go. Then we could have the schedule of the project with all milestones and to understand what we need to do and when. Then we have the kind of table of contents of the whole page. And then we could divide, as I mentioned, like into bytes, all the information. First, standards and best practices, workflows, collaboration strategy, quality assurance and control. How are we going to evaluate the strategy? What I mentioned about metrics and measuring progress. Here we have the model and information strategy that we developed earlier, coordinate system, levels, etc. So everything's divided into parts, so you can rapidly understand where's the information that you need. So maybe this is a way you could show your strategy that is a lot more interactive than just a document. And finally, I will. Okay, and the final thing about implementation is that action gives you feedback. So mostly in long-term projects, that those will give you the possibility to like kind of understand if you're going in the right direction and change things if necessary. In short projects, you could just gather the lessons learned and take them into account for next projects. So my recommendation here is to analyze the metrics that you've set to ask the team for feedback because they will be the ones that actually are working with the strategy, and pivot if necessary. This is not written in stone. You thought this was the best path to get to your BIM goals. Maybe it's not. So don't be afraid to change things. This doesn't mean that you need to change your strategy every day or every week, but you should ask yourself some questions like, are we doing what we said we were going to do? Is it, or are your assumptions still valid? Maybe something has changed, or are there new insights or signals or requests from the client maybe that change things? And if it's still everybody convinced that this is the right way, maybe they are doing things differently because they don't think it's the right way and we need to update some things. So finally, to wrap up, we have discussed about the assessment. We asked many questions to Pao and to other people, all the people related to the project, about the input information, the output, and even some speculative questions like the what if or what could happen if. The planning then about we set standards, workflows, and model and information strategy. And finally, we work with the implementation through a BIM kickoff, through implementation tools like Notion, Loop, etc. And finally, we talked about strategy evaluation. So some keys for success, or just to wrap up everything, I recommend you to try to really understand the client needs, to involve the whole team in the process, to ask as many questions as you can. I think that I left this very clear. And about the planning, first have a plan, measure the progress, and pivot if necessary. And this is kind of a rhetoric question, but if you want to answer in the chat, it would be good. How are you going to approach your project startup next time? Is there anything that you found interesting or that you're going to take to your projects? Oh, love what Pao was saying in the chat. Have a plan, keep it simple, not simpler. Don't reinvent the wheel. Mobilize quickly and control the chaos. Love that. Nico's takeaway: ask lots of questions, follow-up questions, go deep. New BIM execution plan visuals. What are some of the specific item sections? Some of these are questions, small questions, really nice. Oh, thank you. The pain point question is a game changer. Yes, definitely. Pivot when needed. Not everything's written in stone. Have a plan for questions. Love that, Sam. Well, nice. Nice takeaways. So we'll
All right.
leave
Is
some
it time
room
for the Q&A, or do you have more?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah?
No. This is it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. That was awesome. Super. Give me lots of inspiration. Lots of people were wondering about, including myself, about that Notion page that if you shown. So was that kind of a project specific page, or it was kind of an overall
This is
page? And do you actually use Notion page for kind of BIM execution plan or strategy with clients?
yes, mostly I took this from like our BIM team consultancies that when they share the strategy with the client. But for example, in the project that I'm working with, we have for all projects a page where we show the schedule, the task tracking, the meeting tracks, and that kind of stuff. And at the first part, we have a page for BIM strategy, and there's where we put all the things like model and information strategies, modeling logs, all the resources we need. Maybe the checklist, like the quality control checklists, we have them as templates. So we can create ones like when we want to develop a QC process, we create a new page with the template.
And so you would invite clients to these Notion pages so they can see. Yeah, that's really cool.
Yes.
Can you show it again?
Yes. sure.
Yeah, that, and
Um,
people are actually asking if you can share this. I would guess not specifically this, but perhaps we should work on something that we can share, right?
yes, I honestly some of these I added for for
Okay.
the for this
The
session. For
presentation.
example,
Yeah.
this one is like empty, but maybe it's a good like template for you to start with. So I could totally share it. Maybe I will remove some things from the clients, but
Yeah,
I could
because
share that
the
as a template. Sure.
yeah, because the Word document that you share, like that 100 pages PDF that most people don't actually read, that's such a problem and it's so boring and it's a static
Yes.
document. So some people use Plannerly and Plannerly is great. I would say they mostly have templates for like projects on ISO standards, so a bit higher level. If you're doing let's say multifamily housing or that kind of project, maybe you probably don't need kind of the ISO standards. You can check them out, but uh, having such a Notion page would be amazing. If you can share that with clients, it's interactive. You can embed videos, you can embed GIFs. So much more fun than a boring PDF, right?
Definitely. And we convince many clients to start using Notion because
Yeah.
we share like these strategies and they say, okay, this should work. This could work with my company. So yeah. There are
Uh,
obviously other platforms that you can use, but it's more about like the like the way to see things.
yeah. Okay. Let's see. If you have other questions, type it in. I had a few that I. Well, yeah, Johnny was asking if you can share the Notion page. So not specifically this one, but we'll figure something out. We should work on something,
Yes,
right?
sure. I could share kind of a template of this, maybe with no information inside it. I wanted to share something that I
Yeah, go
forgot.
ahead.
Maybe about for example, naming conventions. We usually show them like this, kind of in a coding
Hmm.
way.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
So
Yeah, that's really cool. Hmm.
this is very easy to understand and to find like, well, I need to name a view. So you look for views and you have it handy. So
Yeah, I love it. Another great thing about Notion. Drayton is asking, is there a generic QA QC checklist that you can share? We'll have a session about it with
yeah, I
Leandros in
think that
there. So
Leah will
maybe
share
I will,
that.
yeah. So I think I would wait for that session for the QA QC QA for
Definitely.
being quality analysis and quality control. For those wondering, question from Simi: what are the best ways to make cultural change happen when introducing or developing BIM in a company? Some people just don't accept it or find it hard to accept.
That's very difficult. But I think that the best way is like explaining what I mentioned with with the BIM kickoff, like actually convincing people that this is the right way of doing things. And maybe showing numbers, kind of the way that I show like, okay, you need to model 100%, but if you do it better, you could just model 20%. Um, it's hard, but I think that through training mostly and convincing people, like first you need to be convinced that this is the way, but then like trying to explain, I think that you will get where you want.
Okay. From Andres, what's the most efficient way to standardize project setup across multiple Revit models, specifically when consultant use different templates or coordinate system?
I think that the template I, I truly believe that we should all work with the same standards. So we should choose just one of them. You may have, for example, for MEP a different standard because since there are different categories, maybe you could take the consultant standard and that may work. With coordinate system, I don't like messing up with that. It's quite complex.
Mm,
So for me, it's like something that you need to define in the BIM kickoff, and maybe it would be better if you, for example, create the first model and then share it as a background, so everyone is sharing the same coordinate system, and you don't need to make any changes afterwards because it's very problematic.
you know, we have some sessions specifically about
Yes.
coordinates, setting them up on ACC. So check out the replays. It's also part of the AACC early access course that we released a couple of months ago. Check that. So if you have any questions about coordinates, lots of resource about it. So check out on the membership about that. Let's see. Previously, there was a question from Maya that we get to. All good info here at Slantis is the BIM manager per project or for the company. In the smaller firm, this could be the same person. For my projects, I'm typically the BIM model manager, managing the model, not necessarily the BIM standards process for the company. So I guess it's about role, right? So we often
Yeah.
have BIM manager, BIM coordinators, but it really depends on the scale of the firm. And often on smaller firms, the BIM manager basically work both as a strategy overall, but also on specific projects. Uh, yeah,
Yes.
how do you deal with that at Slantis? So do you have a
It's
main BIM manager that would take care of most of these tenders, or it's
we
shared
are
among all
kind
the
of
team?
all quite BIM oriented.
Mhm.
But actually we work with clients that are architectural studios. So maybe they have a BIM manager, so we align with them on their standards, or if they don't have any, we try to create them kind of basically or within our team. And we don't have a BIM manager, but we do have a BIM team that answers questions for the whole team and helps set up coordinate systems and the complex things. We actually have kind of a happy hour where you can like it's a Zoom meeting that you just join and ask questions. You can ask big questions or architectural questions. But we have like a whole team.
Okay, there's another question that I'll actually answer from Tyler. How often are your projects in a separate site model? I would assume that's in Revit, with shared coordinates versus incorporating the topo solid in the buildings model. So I will share in the link and answer this question.
Yes.
I just recently released a couple of months ago of videos on how to deal with coordinates, linking files together, especially in ACC. My recommendation is typically use a separate site model in almost all cases. Maybe the exception is if you're completely flat site on a single family house, maybe it's not worth it. But in almost all the other cases, I would model the site separately because if the building ends up moving on the site, like, oh, if it's ended up being 1 foot higher on the site or slightly shifted, it's so much easier if you have a separate site model. It can be done in like 10 minutes. Or else you have to move stuff in the model and it's really a pain. All
Yes,
right.
totally do.
Let's see, what else did we have? So I forgot to ask some of these questions. Let us know. I hear we have another one. I'm working in an interior design company. We need to deliver all bespoke furniture, asset, and drawings in Revit. So far, the BEP does not seem to supporting interior design scope that much. Is there a reference for interior design BEP? Or what advice can you give to interior designer who use BIM?
To develop your own strategy. That would be my opinion on this. I know it's very specific, and most BIM execution plan templates don't consider this. But if you're working with like other architectural firms that are considering your strategy, maybe you should like in the BIM execution plan mention your strategy and see if you can align with that. Uh, but I would at least have my own strategy within the interior design team.
Someone is asking is if Stellantis is hiring.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Uh,
there are also a comment about how it seems how collaborative it seems at Stellantis, and especially when it comes to BIM. That's also what it feels like. And when I work at firms and I see kind of a single BIM power user in the whole firm, I always get a bit worried. That's why I try to push people to have more people in the team, not to have all the pressure on a single person. And that also leaves the company a bit at risk if the person leaves for one reason or another. So I like the collaborative approach.
Yes, and we developed these happy hours because there were too many questions running like to anyone in the office, and it's
Mhm.
really good, but sometimes you need to focus. So we set these times for questions. Are you
Uh,
working the AAA? Mm,
Yeah, another question. Are you working with the AIA or other architecture entity to develop more national standards? I feel like the AIA is not doing enough to broadcast the importance of BIM standards and projects.
we're
What do you
not,
think?
but we would love to. If anyone knows anyone in the AA. No, we're not working with them, but I agree that sometimes the like the national standards or the general standards um kind of get outdated. But if
Mhm.
you don't have any in your studio, it's better than nothing. So you need to start from something, and then you could like with every project that you develop, you can kind of take that as a first draft of your standards, and then change everything that you think that doesn't work while you execute the project.
Yeah, I've also find that it's so different depending on where you are in the world. Like in
Definitely.
Europe, like in Norway or the UK, they seem way more advanced in terms of BIM standards that everyone follows. They just mostly follow the ISO 19650 standards. So the BIM execution plan, it's kind of a very strict template. But some would say maybe a bit overly bureaucratic, but at least it's kind of you know exactly what you have to deliver. So in North America, that it doesn't seem to go that far. Each seem to have their own strategy. Unless I guess in some larger projects you might see ISO a bit in North America, but it's still pretty rare. Is that your experience as well?
Yes, yes. No, not many people are requiring that. I think that
Mhm.
we don't have any project that's running with or complying with ISO 19650.
Yeah, I would be
Um,
curious in the chat if how many of you, if you're working with ISO, let us know in the chat and how your experience has been. Yeah, I'm also getting into it. It's a bit complex, like the terminology and the terms they use. It seems they made it a bit complicated, honestly. But
yeah,
I can get why it's certain case it's good to have these standards.
it's easier in some ways, like for everyone to speak the same language, but in other ways, like there are too many documents or too many things, like bureaucratic things that you need to develop. Um, we
Uh,
try. But
I'll just briefly share something. I think you mentioned it, but Plannerly is a great resource if you want to explore ISO standards and everything that is standards in terms of BIM execution plan. They have a template that you can check out for free. So if you want to investigate BIM, international BIM standards, that would be my recommendation. But at the same time, I feel like, especially if you are in the US and North America, in most projects, it's not necessary. But it's good to be prepared for the future and still understand how that works.
yeah, maybe go over like the general part of the norm to maybe it will give you some ideas on what things you need and maybe what's too much, but just to have a clear understanding of what you should set up.
Uh, okay, let's see. I think that's it for the question. Maybe a last one. People were chatting in the chat, so that's not directly related to the topic, but about the best platform for clashes and coordination between clients and so on. Someone asked if Naviswork was still the main platform. It seems most people are moving to ACC now for coordination and
Yeah.
clashes. I've also heard, like in the last 6 months, multiple people, different BIM managers, told me that they're switching to Revisto, and it's actually the best platform for it. So I'm wondering what are your thoughts and what platform you're using most of the time.
We are often using like I use Navisworks, but sometimes I find it like a bit difficult to share information with consultants and with like create issues or to solve problems. It's kind of maybe kind of a silo of information that like you develop your class detection. So I've started using the ACC model coordination module, and I really like it. Like, but I think that for smaller projects it's better. Currently, I'm working with a house, so it's very comfortable to work with it. But I think that with bigger projects, the list of issues will be too much, and it will get a bit like impossible to review. And honestly, I haven't tried Ruby yet, so I should.
Yeah, well, I've seen demos. I've seen it in action. A couple of people had showed me. I haven't used it directly in the projects as well, but I've heard such good things about it that I'll have to get into it. Okay, one final question. What about classifications? How can they be adapted to where each one is used? Does anyone actually use ICMS, International Construction Measurement Standards. Do you know about that? I don't use these personally.
Mm, I don't like what about classification? Okay, we have some clients that work with the CSIs, but I don't know if you're like referring to that. um, but like for classification and stand like naming conventions and standards, I try to keep it as simple as possible. I know that the ISO requires kind of these long names for models
Hmm.
and all these acronyms. But I try to keep it as simple as possible so that people actually use them. So for example, for families, we just use a prefix of the category, that a dash, and that's it.
All right.
So that way it works.
That's gonna be it for this session. Next week with Paula, I see her right there in the session about content strategy. So we'll be talking about the best ways to organize your content that could include Revit families and way more than that. Uh, so looking forward to next week's session. Any final word or things you wanted to mention, Hime?
Not really. Thank you everyone for listening to me for an hour and a half. And see you in LinkedIn or whatever platform.
All
Thank
right.
you for